Okay, so now let's link all the factoring with the trig. So we want to solve this trigonometric equation, right, for all the solutions. So let's go ahead and combine it with factoring. So the first thing that I look at and I realize is that I have a squared term, and then I have one that is the same term, but it's not squared, right? So this immediately lets me know this is a quadratic equation, right? I probably have to use some sort of substitution, some factoring or quadratic formula or whatever, right? And in order for me to solve a quadratic equation, remember that this always has to be set equal to 0, right? So right now it's not equal to 0. Right now it's equal to this number, right? So I'm going to have to move this over. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to subtract 2 cosine of x to both sides, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. And I'm going to have now 8 cosine squared x minus 2 cosine x minus 3 equals 0. Okay, now it's somewhat looks like that, right? So the next thing that I want to go ahead and look at is that, okay, well, I know that I have to factor. If you're comfortable with the cosines and you don't need u substitution, you don't need to do that. But for those that are not quite comfortable yet, right, let's go ahead and do a u substitution, right? We're going to let u equal cosine of x, right? So that means that if I square both sides, cosine squared x is just equal to u squared. So when I substitute that, what I'm going to get is 8u squared, right? So this entire thing is just u squared, minus 2, this part is just u, and then I'm going to have a minus 3 equals 0, okay? So at this point, what we can do is we can do many different things, right? So we can factor, right? Notice that their a is not equal to 1, so we have to go ahead and multiply 8 times negative 3 to get negative 24. Think of two numbers that multiply of negative 24 and 2, right? And then go ahead and do the problem, right? So I won't be wasting time. You can do this on your own, but the two factored forms, or the factored form of this polynomial would be 4u minus 3 and then 2u plus 1. Okay, so you can go ahead and double check me. All right, so all right, so now the thing that we want to do, when it's set equal to 0, I'm going to set both of them equal to 0. So 4u minus 3 equal to 0, and the other one, 2u plus 1 equal to 0. Okay, so I'm going to solve both of them individually. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides, right? So this is just a linear equation. So u equals 3/4. And here I'm going to subtract the 1 to both sides. 2u equals negative 1. U equals negative 1/2. Okay, so now this is not the answer, because remember, initially we were solving for an x value, a cosine, right? This is a u value. Now remember that u equals cosine of x, so I'm going to go ahead and substitute that for u. So cosine of x has to equal 3/4. Cosine of x equals to negative 1/2. All right, now this one's a little challenging, so let's wait a little bit on that one. Let's go ahead and do this one. Okay, so cosine of x equals negative 1/2. Well, if I think about it, right, where will negative 1/2 be? Well, all students take calculus, right? We know that since this is negative, this is going to be on quadrant 2 and in quadrant 3, because cosine is positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. I'm sorry, quadrant 1 and quadrant 4, right? So we know that it has to be there. Now, the way that we can go ahead and do that is just by looking at the unit circle, right? So remember that this is cosine of x equals negative 1/2 at x equals 2, 2 pi over 3, and also at 4 pi over 3, right? These are the two ones. Now, since we want all solutions, we're going to add 2 pi n, and we're also going to add 2 pi n. Or 2n pi, or whatever you want to write, right? So this is where n is a integer, right? Okay, so that's our first one. This one was actually much easier. So this one, we can literally look at the unit circle and try to figure it out. Now this one is a little bit more tougher because this one's not on the unit circle. Well, the first thing that I can do is like, okay, well, where is x, cosine of x equal to 3/4? Well, we know 3/4 is positive, right? So it's going to be in quadrant 1, and it's also going to be in quadrant 4. Right? A way that you can also look at it is like if I go ahead and graph cosine, right? We know that if we graph all of this, right? We know that 3/4 is right here, right? and the quadrants is definitely going to be quadrant 1 and quadrant 4, right? So, but you can do this too. So one way that we can figure out what this number is, right? We can go ahead and take cosine inverse, right, of 3/4 and put this into our calculator and see what we get, right? So make sure that the thing is in radians, right? In radians. So check your mode. And when we take cosine inverse of 3/4, what we're going to get is 0.77, 0.7227, something like that. Since we want all solutions, plus 2 pi n. Okay, so this is our first solution. This one actually is in quadrant 1, right? 0.7727, right? So we got this one. Okay, now how am I going to get this one? Well, I know that if this is positive 0.7727, I just wrote it wrong, positive 0.7227, then I know that this one should be negative 0.7227. Okay, now you can go ahead and leave it like that and add 2 n pi. Something else that you can do is to make this positive, add 2 pi to this, so that will give us 1 full revolution, right? And you will be able to get that. When you add that, what you're going to get is approximately 5.56, right? So this one is 5.56. So the other point is 5.56 plus 2 pi n. And here, remember that n is also an integer, right? Okay, so we have that. So these are all the solutions that we have. Now, it's a lot, but it's doable. Now, let's say, for example, you forgot how to factor. Let's say you forgot this portion. Okay, you forgot how to get from here to here, and it might happen. Okay, well, another alternative that we can do, right? We have au squared minus 2u minus 3, right? If we cannot factor it, another way that we can do it is using quadratic formula. We can use negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Okay, in this case, oops, a equals 8, b equals negative 2, and c equals negative 3, and I can plug all these things in, right? So this is negative is right there, then I'm gonna plug in the b, negative 2, so this doubles, plus or minus square root of negative 2 squared minus 4, 8 times negative 3, divided by 2a, so 8, okay? This is going to give me a positive 2 plus or minus square root 4. Negative 4 times a is going to give me negative 32. Negative 32 times negative 3 is going to give me positive 96 divided by 16. 2 plus or minus, this is going to give me the square root of 100 divided by 16. 2 plus or minus 10 divided by 16. So a little bit more mathematical, but you'll still get the right answer because this I can separate it to 2 plus 10 over 16, 2 minus 10 over 16. So I'm going to get 12 over 16, which in turn gives me 3/4. Here I'm going to get negative 8 over 16, which in turn is going to give me negative 1/2, right? So notice that now u is equal to 3/4. And u equals to negative 1/2. And I knew what u was equal to. U was equal to the cosine of x. Whoops, positive. And cosine of x equals negative 1/2. So I'm back where I started, right? So I'm back at this step, right? So notice that the quadratic formula can take all of this step, right? And do it here, right? And you'll still get the same exact thing. So if you forgot how to factor in an exam, or you forget, or maybe something is not even factorable, right? Here is a quadratic formula that you can go ahead and use. So hopefully this helped out a little bit more doing another problem. Honestly, you just have to keep doing these problems over and over and over again, especially the ones that are not in the unit circle. Remember that if they're not in the unit circle, one thing that you can do is take the inverse of it, right? That will make you get one of them. The other one, maybe it's symmetrical to it, so you can take the negative of it and then add the 2 pi, or you have to use some sort of geometry. Okay, so hopefully this helped.